Getting better at art is really difficult. It's slow and painful. Very, very painful. So, I, the great benevolent ruler that I am, have taken one of my viewers as a sacrifice. As a willing participant. As we go throughout our art journey, we pick up bad habits and make mistakes. But I'm here to help. So, who's on the chopping block today? Ah, look at you. Oh, look at you, Fatser. GG Fatser. Yeah, that's my favorite viewer. Oh, look at that. You even have some of your work here up on the Discord. Oh, how wonderful. Ooh, you even have references. Ooh. I'm gonna have a fun time. I'm gonna be very constructive and very helpful to you, Fatser. Very, 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 very helpful and very constructive. So, let's get started. Alright. So, this is some of my wonderful viewers, viewers' work, right here. This is the blood, sweat, and tears aggregated into one place of GG Fatser. What wonderful work, what wonderful practice, what wonderful salty tears. So, some hand studies and some gesture/figure studies. The bread and butter of a diligent artist. Ooh, wonderful. So, let's quickly take a look at our first example. Exactly. It'll be fine, Patser. It'll be fine. So, what do we see here? What do we see in front of us? We see hands. Very good. Number one job of an artist is to get the idea across. I can tell that these are hands. Bellissimo. Wonderful. Let's start from top to bottom. Okay, this is our first exercise. Wonderful. I can tell that this is a hand closed. I can count all the fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wonderful. Wonderful. You can count. Great job, Fatser. Next up, let's look at this thumb. It has 1 segment, 2 segments, 3 segments. Wonderful. You know how the anatomy of the hand works. Wonderful. Each finger has 3 segments, and the third segment on the thumb is connected to the meat part, to the palm. Very nice. What else do I see? Well, I see nice finger shapes. They're nice and tapered, and they're well designed. Very nice. We can see that it's split up into a palm and into fingers. Wonderful. You understand how hands work. Same cannot be said for a lot of people. So, it's not that hard when working from reference. Look, I'm trying to give you props here, Fatser. I'm trying to give you a bit of props. All right. For now, let's say you did the hand very well. But the glaring issue here that I'm quickly seeing is what's going on here? How does this hand connect to this wrist? You did what the image did? All right. I've gotten some news that apparently this wrist issue here comes from the original reference used. We shall check this claim and verify it. As Fatser was a very, very, very diligent student, he even copied down the references he used. I would not ever do the same thing as he did because I'm lazy, but that's why. Oh yeah, this person just has wacky wrists. What the bloody... What? Okay, I'm currently checking my wrist. Yeah, my wrist does not do that. What the hell is wrong with this person's wrists? Well, I actually know what's happening here. It's where the radius terminates at the wrist. They just have a very prominent radial hump. Radial hump? Is that the right word? I don't know. And that's what's creating that little hump there. Oh, no. There is still some failures here. You're not so free yet, Fatser. Nah, they're not failures, just little things you can improve on. Sorry, let's quickly look at our reference. We're running out of resolution. I think we ran out of resolution. Mom, can we have a resolution? No, sweetie, we have resolution at home. The resolution at home. Oops. Let's play a game of spot the differences between your study and the reference. Let's quickly analyze the reference. So, something very common with the fingers of the hand. So yes, the finger ends. That is definitely one place where there's a difference between your study and the reference is the fingertips. But let's be a bit more specific. Sure, you're missing stuff like the nails, but that's relatively minor. Yes. Very, very nicely put. Not the tips, but the positioning of the fingers. So let's quickly look at this. If you can imagine a center line through these fingers, can you see how they're pointed and they're all converging towards one point? Somewhere over here. When we look at your fingers, they are converging, but in a different way, right? But there's something a bit more interesting happening here. If we look at these two middle fingers, they're basically parallel. But what you actually see here is the pointing and the position of these fingers, the pointer and the pinky are actually the ones that point in. With your fingers, they're all kind of pointing uniformly, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's look at the fingers off of a reference. As I've already said, these two middle fingers are parallel, whilst the pinky and the index are pointed inwards. Another thing to be very careful of is look at how the hand is grasping this pole, stick, whatever. It doesn't really matter. What we can see here is these two fingers right here, so the middle and the ring finger, are completely wrapping around the pipe, whilst the pinky and the middle finger are slightly jutted out. They have not wrapped around the pole properly. Another thing to look at is how this index finger is actually sticking out slightly. If we draw a vertical line right here, we can see that it's actually the second shortest finger, the index finger, for most people. We can actually see that the index finger, which is shorter than the middle finger, is actually sticking out further than the ring finger. If we look at your reference here, we don't see that. We see it is actually being shorter. Now, why is that? We all know that the ring finger should be longer than the index finger. The reason is precisely from what I was talking about before. This finger right here isn't fully closed. This is something very commonly seen when drawing a closed fist. One really common thing to do when drawing a closed fist is basically this finger here is sticking out a bit. It's very common when drawing a clenched fist having one of the fingers pointing out further than the rest. It just lends to nice design. If we analyze this right here, our reference, we can see that there's basically two parts. Here is the wrist, and here are the fingers. Wonderful. If we break down your reference, we still have that main structure. Very nice. Just when you were copying down the fingers, I want you to pay a bit more attention to the actual shapes and the positioning of the fingers. One strategy for drawing the hands is, as you get better at art, or lazier in my case, we tend to try to combine the shapes of the fingers. Simply because the hands are extremely complicated. So, next time when you're drawing hands, try to combine some fingers. In this case, in this fist here, we can actually simplify it down to like two shapes, if we were to break down the reference. The fingers and the palm. And the final shape right here, we can break it down even further as this shape here for the thumb. If we break it down into these simple shapes, we can actually make it far easier and simpler to recreate it later on. So, boom, 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 boom. And look how much easier it is to replicate a much simpler distillation of a reference. Look, it's not perfect. It's not even great. However, it's much easier than trying to copy down each one of these single fingers like this. Afterwards, you can go back into the thing and start to work in the smaller tertiary shapes and other stuff like that. Then you can start adding in more fingers if you need to. If it doesn't read well, then you can start adding in fingers. So the main takeaway here is break down the hand into simple shapes first, and break down the shapes smaller and smaller as you get into it. That way, you can avoid the issue of just drawing one finger, another finger, and then another finger. Inevitably, it's going to create bad design, as well as you're going to get too lost in the details and miss the broader shape of the hand, the silhouette of the hand. Focus breaking things down into big, chunky shapes that you can easily put together like Legos. Then, once you finish that step, once you're happy with that simplification, then you start going into into more detail. So break your hands down into the big shapes to avoid stuff like this happening with your fingers. Another thing that I can see here in your hand is actually the thumb. Now, as I said before, you did use the segments of your thumb very nicely. In fact, quite nicely. We have this middle segment and this tip of the thumb and even the meaty part of the thumb, right? However, one tiny little problem here is your thumb is too big. Your thumb is massive. So be very careful. And look, your entire drawing here, Fatser, one thing that you can be very happy about yourself with is you're very efficient, right? You don't waste a lot of time on a lot of lines. However, this can be to your detriment. I've seen you paint, I've seen you draw. You're very slow. Not just slow. Slow is not bad, but you're overly conscious. Let me explain what I mean. Like, consciousness, isn't that a good thing? It can be, but in your case it isn't. You think too hard about the lines, and you're too afraid to make some marks. Sometimes in art, you just have to put a line down and then fix it. In these cases, you thought about the lines, you thought about them very nicely, and you put them down. However, you didn't step back afterwards and look at them. If we just look at this reference, this tip of the thumb is massive. Massive. A way that you can get around that is just being a bit more loose with your lines. Don't care about the exact lines that you're making for now. And get into the habit of spending that time that you would otherwise have been like focused on like, I gotta get this line perfect, right? Into just putting it down and then critiquing the line. So here, you made the thumb. Perfect. Nice and quick. Now analyze it. Is it good? Is it bad? Which ways are bad? Which ways are good? If you do that enough times, you're like, maybe this thumb is a bit big. Let's make it a bit smaller. Or, I don't really like the shape of that. So another thing that you have really nice, Fatser, is actually your line art, your line work. I can see that you've really internalized. Okay, your question is, but if I don't like the line and I'm gonna correct it anyway, wait. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. What's happening here is you laid down the lines and then you just didn't look at them again. You didn't analyze after you put them down, and that's because you were already spending a crap ton of time. If you were just a bit quicker and a bit more committed, it's not the right word, but blasé about your line, like you care about it, right? But you just want to put it down and then critique it because you spend so much time in trying to try and figure out which line you want to put down that you end up like running out of time and running out of patience and energy to then look at your lines and critique them, right? Is that thumb too big? You probably didn't even ask yourself that question when you're drawing this because you were already really focused on the really small details. You didn't take a step back and analyze. Did the lines I do here actually contribute to the piece? Or is there a mistake here? After you draw, don't spend so much time working, spend most of your time analyzing. Art is actually, like, drawing and painting is actually incredibly quick. If you make no mistakes and you're perfectly efficient, a painting really doesn't take all that much time. A drawing doesn't really take all that much time. Look at any of the masters, look at some of your favorite artists out there. If you see them drawing, they're extremely quick. Well, actually, look at them again. They're not exactly quick. They just don't make some mistakes. If you look at their individual strokes, they're really not that fast. Okay, some of them are, but most of them aren't. What they're really, really good at is A, not making mistakes, and B, when they do make mistakes, they know how to fix them efficiently. It doesn't take them very many attempts. They minimize the amount of attempts made. And the way to minimize the amount of attempts made is to make a lot of mistakes and get comfortable with fixing them. Making mistakes comes in two parts. First, you have to make a lot of mistakes, right? That's where you're really slow, Fatser, right? You're just not making a lot of mistakes. And after you make those mistakes, analyze them and try to fix them. Perfect, yes. Yes, that's good enough. Make mistakes, exactly. But after you make the mistakes, fix them. Fix your mistakes. So in this case... Good. Gamble, yes. So next time, when you're doing, like, anything, right? I want you to just be a bit quicker. You're doing a very good job. You've already done a really, really good job of breaking things down into curves and straights and S's, right? You're already really good at this. It's time to move on to just trying to make these curves and straights a bit quicker. Be a bit more confident in yourself. You now have experience. You've already done all this practice right here in your curves and straights, right? You've already done all this practice. Now just be a bit more confident in yourself and apply them a bit quicker. In theory, yes. And apply them a bit quicker so then you can analyze them and start... You hold a bit too much reverence to your lines. Alright? You just care about them a bit too much. Don't care about yourself too much. It's just a line. You're going to be drawing billions of them. Get comfortable with correcting them a bit more. Get comfortable with just straight up deleting sections that you're not happy with. Be comfortable with just starting all over again. That's what you need to get better at. You need to get better at just restarting and just trying again more often. Yes. Yeah. You are indeed missing that part. But there's several reasons why you're missing the part of after I'm done, review. Right? Because A, it's difficult. Review is hard. And B, you kind of just run out of time, right? How long did this practice take you right here? How long did all these hand studies take you? 30 minutes? Okay, that's actually quicker than I thought. That's good. That's fine. That's fine. I could definitely be wrong. So more than just correct and review, every time you finish a brushstroke, I want you to get into the habit of reviewing, looking at your piece of art, right? After you finish a line, stop and critique. Stop and critique. Stop and critique. Stop and critique. After you make a line, make it a habit of stopping your drawing process and reviewing. And you'll be amazed by just how many different little small mistakes you'll find yourself making. You yourself. You don't need anybody else's help. You'll start to find them yourself. Yeah, that's fair enough. We rush things, I can tell. It's all right. All in all, I think this one here is quite strong. The only real mistakes you made was making this thumb too big and just not focusing on the shapes of the fingers too much. The wrists here and the palm is wonky, but honestly, you just had a bad reference, which really threw you off even further. All in all, I'll give this an 8 out of 10. Very nice. A few things to watch out for. Proportions, and just, if there's a bad reference, ignore it. Right? Alright, on to the next image. Let's take a look at this hand right here. Okay, so immediately what I see is really nice thumb here, really nice straight versus curves, and good design. But one thing that immediately comes to my notice right here is this line right here. Excusez-moi? Now, Fatser, can you tell me why this might be an issue? Why does this not exactly look right? What about this finger is off-putting, to say the least? Yes, it is very much horribly wrong. Long. It is very much horribly long. So, what happened here? Let's quickly review the hand. The hand has quite a few things. At the base of our hand, where it connects to our wrist, we have the carpals. You know, like carpal tunnel syndrome? Yeah, that's the stuff. Now, we have the next set of burns in our hand, which connect to the carpals, called the metacarpals. So, carpal and metacarpals. At the end of these is what we call the knuckles. So, the knuckles are where the metacarpals end. After the metacarpals start the fingers. So we have the distal, middle, and proximal phalanxes of the hand. Each of the burns have these 3 segments. Proximal phalanx, the middle phalanx, and the distal phalanx. So, these 3 are the fingers, and the metacarpals are still in the hand. What happened in your case is, if we were to draw this out, here are the carpals, and here is where the metacarpals should be. Right? Something like that. And this is the length of your carpals. They're too short. Long story short, get it? Fun. This part of your hand is way too short. You basically put the knuckle of the finger way too close. What would be more accurate is to have it somewhere like here, here, and then here, right? So this is about where the knuckle would be. Basically, you put the knuckle too far down. I'm guessing why this happened is because this person's holding something, and it's covering where the knuckle should be. So then you imagined it, and you put it in the wrong place. So, just extend this line a bit further, and connect it. Something like that. Would have been better. So, from the palm side up, this is the proportions of a hand. From tip to base of the middle finger is one unit. The base of the middle finger to the bottom of the palm is about the same length. So if we were to split it down evenly, the middle finger is about as long as the thumb. All right. As long as the palm. And the thumb reaches just slightly above the crease at which your hand connects. Another thing to be really careful of the palm side of the hand, you see how have like a straight line here for the palm? Well, it's actually curved like this. It's curved upwards like this. So right above that crease right there, the thumb should pop up. So this thumb is actually a bit too long. This thumb is obnoxiously long. So from the back, the fingers actually appear to be longer. So this here is the fat pad between the fingers. But between your fingers, palm side turned up, the difference is actually longer. So what's immediately wrong with this hand? Well, you might think that the palm or the fingers are way too short, because here I'm using roughly the same measurement. So this finger is roughly the same length as the palm. It's actually a bit shorter even. But in reality, these fingers should actually be longer. So if we measure from the base of the knuckle to the tip of the finger, that's more accurate. And this is because the fingers have webbing, this area right here. There's webbing. That's what that fat pad is. This fat pad, if you look at your hands right now, you'll see there's webbing between your fingers. The fat pad is that webbing. The fat pad at the bottom here starts where the knuckles are. If you can feel your fat pad on your fingers right now, you can see where the fat pad starts, and it's right at the base of the knuckles on the other underside of your hand. Don't cut it, please. No. So actually, your phalanges, all in all, the proximal, distal, and middle phalanx of the hand is actually longer than the metacarpals plus the carpals combined. So keep that in mind. So from the back and the side, the fingers are indeed longer than the phalanx of the hand. But they're not that. But the difference isn't that big. So if we were to unwrap right now your hand, so that this here, sorry, in blur right here. Actually, let's get a different color. In pink right here is roughly the length of the metacarpals. In green, we'll have the length of your finger. So let's unwrap it real quick. Oops, I don't want to do that. May you see a problem? Yes. It ends up being that you can kind of think about it as the fingers being about 3/5 the length of the hand, all in all, roughly. In this case, it's over the double length. That's why it looks so icky. So you can see that this is nowhere near a 3-to-2 ratio, right? It is horrifying. How do we change it? We already went through this. Just make this line a bit longer. And this is roughly correct. Again, the wonderful thing about art, you don't have to be accurate, you just have to be believable. It doesn't have to be accurate, it just has to be believable. So next time, be careful on your proportions when it comes to the size of the palm. The palm, all in all, should take about half the length, roundabout, give or take, of your hand, depending if you're looking at it from the front or the back. In this case, I actually think you did a very good job at the thumb. You broke it down into nice lines and got the main shapes down. In terms of your thumb, you did a very good job. Now, something to be very careful with about the palm is you most likely accentuate the bump at the bottom of your palm. It's mainly a stylistic thing. It just helps with the design of the hand. Accentuate this bump right here. It's where, it's this burn in the hand. It's called the, where was it? The siform, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Basically, just accentuate the bump of the hand right here. It just helps out your design a lot more. And one last thing about this hand is this wrist. Holy moly, that arm. I know this was a practice on the hands, but just pay attention to the peripheral stuff. That is one wide flippin' wrist. So just be careful with your wrists. Don't have them split out that far. All right. So all in all, I still give this about a 7 out of 10. If this up here was a 8 out of 10, this here was a 7 out of 10. I just have to really take docky points for messing up the proportions to the point where it breaks the illusion of a hand. Like, that's basically all I can see is that, right? No, it's not foreshortening. No. Now, next one is foreshortening. So, I actually think this is your strongest one out of everything else. This here is your strongest drawing. Not necessarily hand study, but drawing, definitely, out of everything you have here. I can see how you broke this down into a cylinder. Now, there's some wonky stuff going here. I don't exactly know what's happening here. You just kind of got a broken hand. So you see here how you split up into two lines? I can see here's the cylinder, and here's the end of the cylinder, presumably. Except you decided to do it in two like that. Keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. What most likely happened is you're likely looking at your reference, and there's likely a bump here, because there are indeed muscles right here. But the way that you ended up doing it just looks odd. If you're going to put a bump anywhere, it would be near the start. Or make it a curve. But by making it two straight lines like this, it just accentuates it. If you're gonna do it like this, make it like an S or C curve. Like that. Alright, on to the next part. So, here you have the form. The cylinder is a bit wonky. I don't know why the end is right here. when it should be here, but that's fine. Oh no, because of where your lines ended, it ended up working fine. Even though that's where your cylinder is. Share the reference. Alright. So all in all, there's just a bit of wonky stuff here in the arm, but you made a good effort into trying to break this down into three-dimensional forms. You just kind of dropped the ball here and there. True. You haven't got up to cylinders yet. But all in all, you did a good job. So, on to what I like about this, right? So you actually did try to break it down into three-dimensional forms, which is wonderful. You just need to be a bit more careful. Here, I can feel a really strong plane right here. I can feel the three-dimensional form of this hand. I like how the fingers are swooped like this. I like how there's a swoop to the fingers. Very nice. And I like the lines and the design. This study has really nice gesture, has a nice flair. Now, the thumb, all in all, is good. It's just, you put this bump right here too high. So if we look back at our reference, not a reference, sorry, but diagram, this segment right here of the hand doesn't extend all that far. It doesn't reach, if you were to like pull it inwards this way, it still doesn't reach all the way up here. Basically, you place this peak right here too high up. Just bring it back a tad. But all in all, you have a very nice plane transition right here. I can feel the planes. I can feel the three-dimensionality right here, where this is a bottom plane, this is a top plane. It's basically a cube, but fancy. You did a cube, but fancy very nicely. You just put this bump right here a bit too far outwards and up. Basically, you made it line up with the joints with the knuckles. You made this joint right here line up with the knuckles, which is very cursed. That joint is lower than the knuckles. Always. Look at your hand right now. If you put your hands side by side, your thumbs side by side to your palm, you can see, so this joint right here is only about halfway up. No, not even halfway up. Because it's at an angle, right? This is where it originates. It's only halfway up. So about a third of the way up your palm. So even if you clench your fingers, when you clench your fingers, this stuff comes down, but the size of your palm doesn't change. See that? So it's still only about a third of the way up your hand, this joint. Now, depending on the length of your thumb, sometimes this joint here can line up with the rest of your knuckles. However, absolutely not this. In no scenario does that joint right here end at the knuckles. That is really cursed. So next time, just make sure you just pull that back a bit. Pull that joint of the thumb just a bit. Oh no, you did a good job. I'm giving you a 9 out of 10. Just be very careful with where you put your joints. Don't make that line up there. On to the last one last hand I'll be reviewing today. Is this one. As you said, this was your rushed one. You're off late to class, and we're just like rushing this one. Fair enough. But that's why this one's really good to study, to understand you as an artist. That's why it's useful. Here, you have really nice finger shapes, right? You're really focusing on the curved side and the straight side of the fingers that I talked about, right? The inside is usually curved, made out of curved lines, and the outside is usually made out of straights. You mess it up here and there because, again, you're rushing on time. But one thing I realized here was, why are you not constructing? Where are your cubes? Fatser, where are your cubes? I know this was mainly a type of gesture thing. I understand that. This was mainly a gesture study. However, hands can be really helped out with a bit of form and structure. You had basically no time. But if you had no time, you weren't using them, yes. Use your three-dimensional forms. Use use all the tools in your toolbox. Why weren't you thinking in three-dimensional form here? Why? If you're rushing, that's the one time where you really need to like focus down on your forms. This was also done quickly. And it also is suffering with a lot of like problems with like proportions, anatomy, and other things, right? However, it still looks less wonky than what you did. Why is that? Why? Because at least it had some semblance of form, right? So even if you're running low on time, there's always time for your basic forms. Now, lastly, of course, there's some issues here, like these fingers are really fat, and yes. But that's basically what I want to tell you. In all these, the one thing that you're missing is you're really, really careful with your reference, and you're really focused on the curves and straights and the nice like line work, right? But one thing that you're constantly missing is, Fatser, you're not me, right? Use an underlying sketch. Sketch more, Fatser, sketch. Sure, focus on these lines, that's fine, but sketch a bit more. Like, outline your forms. Use layers. Yes, you can. Yes, you can, Fatser. You absolutely can sketch with a pen. This is how you do it. Make your sketch lines. Here, I have a pen right here with zero sensitivity, zero like shape change, zero opacity, right? And you can still sketch with this pen. You know how? It's very simple. Just draw over your lines. It's that simple. Don't think about it too hard. Use your lines to think. You're trying to just get the perfect line down immediately. That's fine when you're doing gesture. Doesn't work? What do you mean doesn't work? Just draw over your stuff. It doesn't matter. You're thinking about it too hard. Your drawing is your thinking. Use your drawing as a way to help you think. If you're really stuck on a line, you don't know how to like do something, just go for it. Just jump straight into it. Guess and then correct. Now, if you're sketching digitally, even better. Now you have layers. Now you can just create a new layer, turn down the opacity on that one, and you can just go over it again. This time with newfound confidence and success. Now, do I do this? No, because I'm lazy. But should you? Why not? Try it out. Have an underlying sketch. In this sketch, really focus down on your forms and other things. Like, just, your first layer is just your thinking, trying to break down your reference, right? Then the second layer is just going over it and then trying to, like, fix up some of the stuff. And do as many of these layers as you need to understand something. What do you mean it doesn't work? In what way does it not work? Okay, I understand how you got into this. Just because it looks better doesn't mean it's more correct. You're still learning, Fatser. You're not trying to make something that looks nice. You're trying to learn from the thing. You're right. If I just look at a reference and I try to just copy like what I see directly, right? Without trying to break things down into shapes, into forms, into different things, I could probably get it to look nicer looking, quicker, and easier. However, A, there's a limit to just how much you can learn from doing that. And B, there's a limit to how good it can get. You currently don't have the tools nor the skills to do that properly. You just so happen, it just so happens that your skills to copy right now are better than your skills of understanding. Right? But ultimately, your skills of understanding are more useful than your skills of copying. So right now what's most likely happening is you're applying cubes, right, in the wrong ways. Or you're just not understanding what you're doing. So every time you break down those images, the reason why it's not working right now is because you're messing up, because you're not doing it right. It's that simple. It just means that you're making some mistakes. Either your parallels are not working, or you're using the boxes in the wrong ways, or... So when I say break it down, so remember, Fatser. So look, that means you already have a bunch of practice in doing that. Sir, remember, Fatser, what are the tools in your toolbox? What are the tools in your toolbox? Well, you have gesture in your toolbox. Wonderful. So, one way of thinking about it is first do a gesture before you start. before you start your study of the thing, just quickly do a gesture to get the gist and understanding, and just get used to it in the flow of things. Just get used to the reference and get in the flow of things. The next thing is, yes, you have boxes. You know how to draw boxes. The next step is whatever you're analyzing, turn into boxes. If you're analyzing a human head, break down the head into smaller boxes. It doesn't have to be accurate. It just has to be able to be broken down into boxes. See how I even made a head with boxes? Granted, it's not exactly a pretty head, but it has three-dimensional form. So at the very least, when you're breaking stuff down, use the tools that you have. You don't have all the tools, and you don't have all the... I'll allow that. You don't have all the tools, and you don't know all the ways of using your tools, right? But you do have them, so use them. A lot of the times here, I just see you not using any of your tools that you're learning. You're just not using them. Learn to use the tools that you're learning. So you know how to draw boxes, so use them. Not every job requires a box. A box isn't the best tool for everything, but it's the only tool you got, so you might as well learn how to use it and where it breaks. Slowly as you get better, you learn more tools and you learn how to use them and when to use them. You know gesture, so use gesture. Break down your reference in terms of gesture, then break down your reference in terms of boxes. After the boxes, try to smooth things out. Then maybe this shape right here can be symbolized by, I don't know, maybe a sphere. So after boxes, you go into different forms. The next step is breaking things down into forms. Into cylinders, I draw a sphere. Into spheres / ovoids. Into cylinders. Into other shapes, right? Into boxes still. I want you to get to the point where you skip the boxes stage and you go from gesture directly into forms. Break things down into the forms. Gesture plus forms is what you need for figure. That's all you need for figure. Gesture and forms. That's all you need. If you max out the skills of gesture and you max out the skills of forms, you can do any figure studies. Boxes are basically the light version of forms. Also the more difficult version in many ways. Yes, use your tools. Break it down into simple forms. Here, you're really focused on the gesture side of things. The curve versus straights, your line quality, it's very nice. But you're only using one of your tools in your toolbox. Well, to be fair, you're using two tools in your toolbox. One is basically look at your reference and copy, right? That one you have plenty of practice in already. But you use none of your other skills, like boxes. So one way of doing this is do this first, and after you finished it, go back into your drawing and then try add the boxes back into it, right? Try to imagine where the boxes would be and try to catch some of your mistakes while using those boxes, right? Okay, that's enough of hands because I'm sick and tired of hands. On to the next thing, which is your gestures. So here, you're really focused on straight lines, apparently. In this study session, you were really focused on straight lines. All right, good. Straight lines are a good place to start. And it's a nice thing to return to once in a while. Only using straight lines and then trying to do figure with straight lines. It's a nice bit of practice. Straights are really nice because it's easier to analyze angles. So let's look at this sheet and look at your strongest figure on the sheet, which is definitely this one right here. This here is your strongest figure. On this entire page, this here is your strongest figure. Let's break down why. You're only focusing on angles? Okay, so in these two here, you're focusing on angles. All right, so let's analyze it in that way. So on to the next one. Here, you were doing figure / gesture / whatever, right? You're doing some studies of humans. And you were focusing on angles of different things. Wonderful. So let's analyze it through that lens. In this page, the strongest figure here, I would say, is this one right here. Probably followed by this one right here. Immediately what I see here is there's a really strong feeling of the stretch and pinch right here of the torso. The stretch and pinch. So it stretches and pinches. We've talked about this before. Next up is the flow. Right here. Through the leg, up the torso, and up here. There's a really strong flow and energy going through this way. There's also the opposing energy of this stick right here going down that then connects to the leg and comes outwards. So if we analyze it through like energy and flow and line of action, strong. If we analyze it through like energy right here of your shapes, this stretch and pinch done very nicely, especially for the torso. Onto the legs, we can see that this leg right here is nicely tapered. We've talked about tapering before, which you always want a tapered shape. You never want perfectly parallel stuff, or God forbid, have this shape. This shape appearing in your art, avoid it at all costs. The symmetrical round thing, as I like to call it. 100% causality? I don't know what that means, but yes. Sadly, it's kind of lost with this leg here. I think you just could have pushed the taper a bit further with the legs. So, another thing done very nicely is the tapering of the limbs. All the limbs are tapered, and not the round bobbly shape that I hate. So far, we've analyzed that it has nice stretch and pinch, it has nice tapering of the limbs, and it has fairly strong gesture. It has a nice negative shape right here that he captured quite nicely because you were using straight lines and you focused on angles. It ended up making it so you have a really nice strong negative shape right here. You have really nice strong shapes. So the main hallmark feature of this drawing of yours, Fetzer, is really strong shape design mixed with good gesture. That's why this one works so well. Now, is there a few things that I would still change with this? Yes. Is it really, really good? Yes. Is it perfect? No. So let's quickly go on to some of the issues with this right here, right? So I know that you were focusing on gesture and angles and stuff like this, right? But never forget your form. Never. Why am I saying this? It's basically because before you get started on these, always focus on creating the hips, of always like defining the hips and the pelvis and the ribcage, right? So here, because of the shape that you used, it's nice and clear where the ribcage would be. I can imagine where like the clavicles and the ribcage would be. They're a bit small, but that's fine, right? You were not focused on proportions. You were just focused on angles and stuff like that. That's fine. But what happened here with the pelvis? This pelvis is lost to time. So when you get started, even when you're doing gesture, just bang out the hips and pelvis really quickly. Just a circle, like an oval, so like an egg for the ribcage, and a box for the pelvis. Keep it simple before you get started. Then do your other stuff on top of that. It's good practice to always do that stuff. Then it makes like extruding your limbs and other stuff 100% easier. So before you get started with any of your stuff, just draw in a quick... Good. If you start with the three main masses, good. However, you just kind of lost the pelvis here in that case. It never hurts to just draw out the simple forms. It's really quick, it's really easy, and it doesn't really get in the way of your drawing later on. Even if it does, too bad. You're not making a drawing, you're doing a study. So all in all, you did a good job. It's just you lost the hips along the way. So let's analyze some of your weaker ones, right? This is a really good one. Let's analyze a weaker one. The first ones. So the reason why you suck at lame poses is because they're some of the hardest poses to do, period. But if you stick to your fundamentals, they're still doable, but they're very annoying. It's because you're drawing the human body at a very unnatural angle that you're not used to drawing, or looking at people from that angle. You're also not used to like drawing forms with a lot of So with foreshortening, the biggest thing is not actually things get bigger as they come towards the camera. That's not really the hardest part. It's getting the overlap. Overlap of things. That's the hardest part of laying down poses, right? So here, you're doing the same mistake that I do. We can see here that here is the ribcage, here is the body, and here is the pelvis. Oh, something like that, right? You see how they're like really like separated. You're still practicing social distancing, you know? Yes. Basically, you minimize the overlap, which is a natural human instinct when we're drawing. But in this case, I'm betting my left testicle that in the actual reference, there's a lot more overlap with right here, with the ribcage and the pelvis. It was most likely something like this. So again, a lot of these issues here could have been avoided or helped with by just breaking things down into the simple forms first and then applying your gesture to it, if that makes sense. The biggest takeaway from this in your practices is really focus down on your forms, on your structure. Gesture is important, but gesture is really tough to do without any form. So as a whole, this page right here is much stronger than the last one. But I actually don't think it's because you got all of a sudden got any better. I honestly don't think it's because all of a sudden you just got way better. I think what happened here was basically you picked much nicer purses. Purses with a much clearer structure, much clearer gesture, and much more comfortable gesture and structure, right? All these purses here are a lot more comfortable than the ones right here. These purses here, you're really pushing your comfort zone. Anytime you leave your comfort zone as an artist, you are going to suffer. It just comes with the territory, right? A lot of these are a lot of difficult purses, especially this one's a really annoying one. And these ones, and these ones, and this one. These two here were easier, and that's why you did better on them, because you were more familiar and they were within your comfort zone. That's why you did better. You weren't all of a sudden like a shitty artist here and a good one here. You're a good artist in both places. You're just not in your comfort zone here. That's what happened. That's good. So this page had a lot of learning opportunities, but they're different kinds than this page. This page is more about refinement. This page right here is more about discovery. And of course, a page focused on refinement is going to be prettier and nicer looking than the one about discovery. Here you were just discovering, here you were playing around, here you were just trying your hand at something. You're out of your comfort zone. Here you were more within your comfort zone, so you did a better job. It just comes with the territory. Anytime you do something you're more comfortable with, you're likely going to do a better job. But something really interesting about analyzing work in your comfort zone, in my opinion, that's the stuff where the real high quality learning can come from. The refinement stage. The learning stage is really important and you should be doing all the time. You should always be pushing your boundaries as an artist. But what's even more important than just pushing your boundaries is actually, how do I say this? Looking within yourself as an artist and analyzing where you went wrong in your learning. Finding your misconceptions, finding your ingrained mistakes, your bad habits, and things like that. That's where real progress is made. Learning new things is where quick progress is made. Refining things is where, you get refined. Both are important, but one is not done enough. In this page, there are two gestures in this page that stand out the most to me, being the highest quality. This one, and this one. And for different reasons. Would you agree with that statement? Do you think those are your two most interesting and well done gestures on this page? I'm going to call them gestures from now on to keep it simple. The last one, this one? Yeah, I see it. But this one here is also pretty good. Can you explain why you like it? Why do you like that last one? Ah, you like it because of the torso. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Where do you see it being 3D? Did I say that? I don't think I said that. In fact, I was going to talk about how this one felt a lot more 3D than whatever. All right, let's break this one down here. The one I like. This one I really like because I get a sense of three-dimensionality. Not because you're using forms. Again, you're using a lot of flat two-dimensional shapes, which is fair enough. That's where you're focusing on. But this one feels a lot more three-dimensional because I can feel the horizon line right here, right? This feels like I'm looking up at it, right? Why? Well, this is touching on something I mentioned earlier. Remember how I was talking about with laying down poses? The reason why it's really hard is because there's a lot of overlap and drawing things from weird angles. The thing that you did here very nicely was have the overlap and drawing things from weird angles. That's what you did really well here. On top of that, so we can actually think about this. So here, the hips slightly overlap the rib cage, and the rib cage overlaps the head. This leg here, the thigh is overlapped slightly by the lower leg. This thigh here is overlapped by this leg right here. Plus, there's really nice energy to it. You can see that? How everything's heading up this way. So it has really nice gesture, And there's really nice overlap of features, creating a sense of like you're looking up at it. Again, another thing, going back to the basics, even when you're doing gesture, you're now at the level where you can start adding in forms to your gesture. So combine your forms and your gesture. That's a place where you can improve this. Now, let's quickly talk about anatomy. I know this is gesture, and you weren't focused on the anatomy of things. You were just trying to get the feeling across, but this is a good time to talk about it as any, right? See how much more alive that feels? I used basically the exact same lines you were doing. I just added in a bit of my understanding of anatomy and a bit of my understanding of different things. You can see how immediately how much more alive that feels and a lot more human, right? We're sharing the same construction, same anatomy. Same construction, same gesture, but this feels a lot more alive, right? It's because I'm adding in the little details, right? The little bumps here and there. And just modifying my lines a bit more to imply anatomy. Yes. So the reason why I could do that so easily just then is because you had a really strong gesture. Now, are you starting to see why gesture is really important? So the reason why that was really easy for me to do just then is because you had the really strong gesture, because you already did most of the 3D thinking for me, because you already overlapped your different features. So for me, it was much easier to just add a bit more of my anatomy knowledge and little tidbits here and there to make it into a lot more of a live drawing because of your strong gesture, because of your strong construction. Once you start adding in the little tidbits of information from your understanding of anatomy and other things, right? Your sense of style, your sense of like stuff like this. So gesture is just like a skeleton, right? It's a skeleton to put your knowledge onto. That's why nailing down gesture and form is so important. It's because then you can start dressing it. This is basically what I'm talking about. What I was talking about before, for you to not just head in straight into just like trying to copy off your reference. This is what I'm talking about, using your tools in your toolbox. I just used your usage of the gesture tool to make my own drawing, right? That's what I just did. I used your tools to make my thing. So there's basically two ways of using your tools. Either you have a really, really strong mental schema of your things where you're already doing all that stuff in your head, aka that just means experience. The more experience you do, the more steps you can skip. Or the other way of doing it is layer things. Not necessarily layer on top of each other, right? But do multiple passes, understandings. So there's two ways of doing it. Like literally taking what I'm saying literally, right? So like doing it in multiple layers. So you first do here your gesture. And then on top of it, you start to like add in your shapes. Your forms. To understand the three-dimensional forms, right? After you do that, then you can start doing in the actual line art on top of that, right? Then you can start doing that stuff. That's one way of doing it. Literally doing it in layers like that. Nothing wrong with that. It is a legitimate way of doing things. The other way of doing that is first doing your gesture study, then doing it again separately, but this time trying to follow your gesture with your forms. So first draw your forms. Basically, each sketch you do is kind of like a study. And you're trying to bring the stuff that you learned from the last thing into the next thing. One thing you'll find if you do it like this way, you start to lose a lot of things, right? This drawing that I did, even though the form is more correct than what your thing is, the gesture of this one is weaker, right? So that's the other way of doing it. Basically, if you do a gesture pass, it's just to learn the gesture, so then you try to apply it a bit more, your understanding, to when you're doing the form again. Or you can literally just pile on top of each other the forms. Basically, do multiple passes. Do a figure pass, then try to apply forms to that, that gesture pass, then try and apply forms to the gesture. And then afterwards, you can start adding in the spice to your drawing on top of that. Try that out in your next practice. So first do the gesture, then apply some figure to, apply some form to it, right? That's what I want you to do. All in all, you did a very good job here. Some of these are stronger than others, but the biggest takeaway from all your drawings here, the biggest takeaway for you, Fatser, today, is apply some of your tools in your toolbox. Once you finished, so do your multiple passes of your reference. First pass is choose which one. You have to choose what step you use. Which is your first step? You either do your gesture or your construction first. You either break it down into forms or you do the gesture first. It's up to you. There's no right or wrong way of doing it. Then do the next pass of figure or gesture. I personally like to start off with figure, then I move into structure, and then go back into figure again. Sorry, gesture, sorry. I go from gesture into form, back into gesture again. That's usually what I do. I just do it a bit faster, right? And I merge the two. Actually, a more accurate way of putting it, what I actually do is I go form, then figure, then form, then figure again. I just switch between the two very quickly, and I mix the two, right? That's what I'm usually doing. I usually go with form first, just to get my big shapes down. So like the pelvis and the ribcage, that's form. Then I start adding in the figure. So the figure of the neck right here. This right here is the gesture of the neck, and then I go with the gesture of like the chest, the clavicles. And I go back into the gesture of the arm. Then I go into the gesture of the arm, and I come back into the arm for the form, right? And then I describe the form a bit better. Then I go back into the gesture of the other arm. Go back with form, the form of the chest, the form of the thing. So I mainly rely on gesture in my drawings for the limbs. The limbs is the most useful place for gesture, and the spine. Gesture is most useful for the spine and the limbs. So lay down your forms, apply some gesture to it. So basically just get used to switching between gesture and form. Use one to inform the other, if that makes sense. That's your biggest takeaway. Use some of the tools that you've learned. Use some of the forms. Use some of your cubes. Use some of your... use your tools. All in all, you did a good job. Just start using your tools together. When you get stuck, try a different tool. You're problem solving. All in all of these are done very nicely. So, with this one and this one, you have the planes of the face done very nicely. There's a little ridge right here where the nose meets the brow ridge, right? Here you have the socket of the eye, very nice, and here you have a three-dimensional form of the nose. I'm wondering what that form right there is supposed to be, but all in all, it's pretty good, right? Right now, the strongest part on this face is definitely the eyes and the nose, right? Now, there's a bit of an issue here where the skull is tiny, right? So one thing that I'm seeing very common amongst all of these right here is you generally have all the right features. It's just, how do I say this? You're messing up the 3D space of things, right? You're messing up the 3D space. Your forms are just not there. Your construction isn't there. Your analysis is good, but your forms are not there. Your intuition of 3D space just isn't there yet. And that's fine. That's good. Let's quickly talk about that first. Honestly, the number one exercise for you right now, Fatser, is going to be cross contours. Let me explain why. So cross contours are basically your way of measuring things in three-dimensional form. You know, with how with your lines and stuff, you can literally just measure stuff. It's much easier to measure stuff, right? In like when you're drawing something two-dimensional. This is about twice the length of this because I can literally measure it with my fingers. Right now I'm doing it with my fingers. Like this right here is roughly the same length as this. But it's much harder to like measure stuff and break things down into like segments in three-dimensional form. And that's literally all you're doing with cross contours, right? You're just breaking things down into segments. That's all cross contours are. So let's quickly do that to some of your faces. So let's start with his skull. So imagine a line on his skull right here. That's the center line. It follows the form. And we're quickly seeing how both sides here are not even. We can see how his jaw is moved, like the amount of his mouth is moved that way. And, you know, it's a bit wonky. This right here is much better. This one right here, the center line actually kind of makes sense. This faint thing doesn't. We can see here on this skull right here, we can see how both sides here are not exactly symmetrical. Alright, so let's quickly go over cross contours with you. So, the simplest shape to cross contour is a sphere, the humble sphere. And the thing I struggle with the most. I also start with cross contours, and my understanding of three-dimensional space is also not as good as I want it to be. It never will be. Oh yes, I do as well, Fatser. I also struggle with that a lot. So you can see how these cross contours are at 90 degrees to each other. From now on, anytime you do cross contours, I want them all to be to be parallel or tangent. Tangent? No. When a line is like this to another line. Tangent? Perpendicular, thank you. Oh my goodness. Tangent is when they meet. Like, where they share the same gradient. Like, dear lord, my brain just died there. So from now on, anytime you draw a cross contour, for now, I want them to be either parallel or perpendicular to each other. Because that's when cross contours are useful for measurement. Actually, can I ask you to do something right now, Fatser? I just want to see where you're at with cross contours. This is what I want you to do right now. I want you to draw a blob, if you can, something like this, and then put cross contours onto it. Digital, traditional, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I just want to see where you're at with cross contours. I want you to draw a blob like this and draw some cross contours. That's all I want you to do for now. Just a couple. Like cross contours, not blobs. Just do one. Yep. The oh gosh, I understand very much. This is actually a really advanced exercise. It's not easy. If you can get really good at this, your painting is going to get much better very quickly. That's right. Just take your time. I'm gonna be painting my blobs until you're ready. Okay, I thought that was my thing buffering, Dart. You just didn't take it in focus. Okay. So, all in all, you did a pretty good job here. Honestly, better than I was expecting. But there's still some areas where you can improve. This line, this line, this line, all very parallel to each other. This line, this line, this line. Very nice. And they're all in pretty good perspective. And you curved around the form at the edges quite nicely. I can see how you're curving around right here. I like to overcurve them and then delete a bit. That's how I like to do my curves. I like to go a bit over and then just delete. It just allows me to do the little round edge a bit better. So all in all, you did a pretty good job here. Now, be careful with this one back here. You see how it doesn't really wrap around? It's just kind of flat right here. So that basically ruins the illusion a bit. So be careful when you're wrapping things around. You have to be very careful and very diligent to make them wrap around properly. On to the next thing. So what I see here, what you did here, is excellent. You see how this one wraps around? And where they would merge would be somewhere on the side right here on the thing. I really like how you didn't like force the lines into like connecting, and you let it just like, you know, just whisper away onto the other side. Very nice thinking of three-dimensional form. Very nice. Now, on to the hard part. So again, so this line here can just be a bit more curved, but here you did a very good job. Really convincing. So far, in your thing, this part of the blob really is convincing of three-dimensional volume. You've done a very good job right here. Now, onto the harder part of this blob, which made it a lot harder, right, is this part. This part is very hard. It's the place where I also mess up my blobs a lot. Here you really have to think about the three-dimensional shape. This line, and this line, and this line. So there's basically 4 different lines that describe this form. Don't do it justice, right? They're just incorrect, and they just don't describe the form very well. Why? Very simple. It's not that they're necessarily wrong individually. Each one of these lines, for the most part, except for this line right here, can be correct. Could be correct. Except that they're disagreeing with each other. So you can see right here how you have this part right here. This part of like your this line right here of your blob really fucked you up. This line right here of your blob really fucked you up because you couldn't really imagine how the form would go there. Which is fair enough. It's a really hard thing to do. Sometimes you just have to make a guess and sometimes you're wrong. So what I would have personally done right here is I would have actually made this line down here just wrap around a bit further. Not go all the way over here. I'd make it wrap around here. So these 2 lines would never connect. You see how they're connecting like this and it's really ugly? and it really flattens down the image. Instead of doing what you did here, where you lose the edge, you make them connect almost forcefully, and it just flattens down the form right here. So one way you could have gone around this is just make it wrap around and make them never, like, meet each other. Okay, next thing is, right here, is these lines are just really, really flat. We can see how in this blob right here, they're wrapping around. They're wrapping around the form. Here, they're just like, straight line, bitches. Woohoo! Spheres, unless you're looking directly at them, right? Never have a straight line for a cross contour. So first, decide on what, like, the shape is here. In my head, this is like a blob right here that wraps around this blob that's kind of connected to this one right here. So something like this. Imagine how it would wrap around the form. You see how, like, this transitions right here from describing, so this part of the line describes this form, and then this line continues to describe this rounding of the form. That's what you're missing here. So basically, you're, like, breaking up into two parts. This part of the line worked very well. It described the form very accurately. And then it just didn't follow the form. It just went across it. You didn't imagine the second bump right here. You didn't decide on a form. You didn't decide on its form, right? So here, it should wrap around. You see that? Instead of keep going straight, it should wrap around. Now, understanding how things wrap around like this is what you're missing right here. So let's quickly draw some cross contours on your skull and some parallels, right? Yeah, exactly. You're not deciding on the form, you're just drawing, right? That's the issue. So decide on the form first, then describe it with the cross contour. So let's take this skull. This is one of your more accurate skulls, right? In terms of perspective. So that's why we'll use it. So this one is actually probably this one and this one are your strongest. In terms of perspective and three-dimensional form. Actually, are they? Yeah, let's go with them. So, immediately, something a bit wrong here is, let's draw the cross, so this is the center of the face, right? This is the cross contour. You need to kind of ignore the sphere in some of these, especially this one right here, where you have a sphere right here, and you proceed to draw the face on a completely different plane. So, like, the face on this one would be somewhere over here, right? This would be the face that goes, that matches with this, but your face ends up being over here. It happens. It happens to all of us. It just happens. It's a normal thing. It happens. So here, we can imagine this cross contour right here. This is about the center of the face, right? All of a sudden, but the cross contour for the sphere right here would be something like here and here, right? So you can see how these cross contours mismatch. And then the cross contour for the mound of the mouth right here is also mismatched. It's like this way. So the mouth is pointing this way. The face is pointing this way. And the head is pointing this way. Do you see the problem? Each one of these parts of the face are pointing different directions. Now, this is something that happens all the time. Not just an in-between frame. No. This is what happens when there's, like, VSync. Like, VSync isn't enabled, and somebody's turning their head. Right? So, like, remember, like, the screen refresh from top to bottom, right? So, like, this is, like, the head's already turning, and still hasn't turned yet. This is VSync off. So, basically, the cranium is facing this way, the face is facing this way, and the mouth is facing that way. That's what's happening here. It's because you didn't decide on the forms first. So, if we're to fix it, let's take this so let's take the face here as our cross contour, the middle cross contour. So you can use cross contours as, like, the middle guide, the middle of your head. So then we can modify the cranium to fit our cross contour. Give me a second. I need to, like, imagine the forms right here. I'm not used to drawing on other people's forms. This is usually happening in my head, and I don't think about it consciously. I understand what's going on here. This right here is going upwards. That's what's messing me up. There we are. This would be a much more accurate version of the skull. There's still some wonky stuff here. That's my fault. Like this skull right here. So now we can imagine the cross contour on the thing much easier, right? We can even have one that's going around like this. That's describing the side of the head. You see? Now we can imagine cross contours on this form. So go over yourself and just keep tweaking it until the cross contours make sense. That's one way of going about it. It's the more labor-intensive method and the non-understanding method, right? So just really focus on the cross contours. If you can't imagine a cross contour on it, that means you got it wrong, right? And now, because we have the cross contours, we can use them to measure them, right? Because we know, here's the wonderful thing about the cross contours, right? So from a profile shot of the skull, do you have a profile shot of the skull here? No. Okay, so this is one place where it can really help you. Cross contours can really help you. So now let's understand how to translate the cross contours from a two-dimensional drawing into a 3D object, right? So because the reason why cross contours are really useful because you can translate them from 2D onto 3D. That's why they're really useful. Okay, this is a rough drawing of the skull from the side, right? Not perfect, not great, but whatever. Okay, so this is a skull from the side, right? What are some useful cross contours for measurement that we can use for the skull? So we can see that this here is the center line. The center line of the head is roughly where the jaw ends, right? So this line right here is a cross contour now. So we can draw it. So we can take a cross contour from the center of the skull and we can extend it around the form. So we're applying this knowledge. So we already know you can do this, right? We already know you can do this. So first decide on the form and then make lines that follow it. Boom. That's what we're doing right here. So now we extend this cross contour along the side, and this is where the side of the jaw would be. If you look at your original, right, over here, we can see that it's connected in the slightly wrong place, right? So we can extend this line of measurement onto our three-dimensional object right here. Wonderful. We can also extend this again, so we can use this again for measurement, that we know that all these features line up. So to draw three-dimensional forms, you need 2 or 3 drawings, depending on what you're doing, to understand the form. You need one from the side, one from the front, and preferably one from the top or bottom for most non-concave forms. So, and now a skull. I need a place where I can draw a skull from the front. Your skull's concave. Visit a doctor. All right. So now here we can have another line here. And then that's this cross contour right here. And just make it make sense, right? So now we have this line and this line, and use these cross contours for measurement. Use cross contours to measure stuff. If you have a side profile and you have a front-on shot, and you just draw these lines, try and match them up with the cross contours. That's how you get convincing third-dimensional form. Now, here's a mistake you'll likely make, is after you make these cross contours, right, you're going to try and make things symmetrical. If something has a cross contour, and it's not front-on or side-on, it should never be symmetrical. A line of cross contour is a line of asymmetry on what you're actually drawing. It's a line of symmetry, from front on, if it's symmetrical, from side on, it should never be symmetrical. Never. Never. If it's side on, it should never be symmetrical. So in this case, right here, in your head, this is happening again, right? If we were to draw a cross contour for your skull right here, this part of the face is actually done very nicely. Look, it's a bit flat. Your face here is a bit flat. You're not really pronouncing a lot of things, but that's fine. The bigger issue, the glaring issue in here is your jaw connects in the wrong place, because let's get into why this happens. It's because your head again is following the wrong cross contour. This head right now feels like, so this is the front of the face, but now it feels like the head is going this way. It feels like the cross contour for the head is going this way. See? It feels ajar. And if you draw the cross contour here, sure, right now on the skull, the jaw is in the right place, except the cranium is in the wrong direction, going in the wrong direction from the rest of your thing. So if we were to extend this line right here, like this, and now that we draw the second cross contour, we can see that the jaw is in the wrong place. So we move forward the jaw a bit. So if we fix up the skull shape and we move the jaw a bit forward, and boom, immediately 1,000,000 times better. Yes, you do tend to do that. Well, in this case, it's the opposite. You made the inside side too small, right? This would have been a really nice one if you didn't mess up this eye, right? And the reason why this happened was because you got the outside contour, right? But then you didn't place... Sorry, one thing to be really careful about your skulls from the side... Oh, this is really tripping me up. The reason why is because, again, it feels like this part right here is facing this way, but your face is facing, like, I swear I can just like draw a center line right here, and each individually are correct. For the most part, this looks correct, and this looks correct, right? But them together looks incorrect. It feels like you're drawing this one from side on, and this one you're drawing from the front. Also, one thing to be really careful about the skull is, remember, it doesn't extend all the way down. The cranium does not extend over here. It ends prematurely. If you look at this again, it ends at about where the eye socket, like at the bottom of the eye socket. That's as far down as the cranium goes. That's one thing to be careful of. Yeah, for real. Like, feel it. Feel it in your head. Feel the base of like where your your skull meets your neck, and then just like cross contour with your hand onto the front of your face, and you'll see that the bottom of your skull, the little ridge at the bottom, this part right here fits horizontally up to here. So let's actually extend the cross contour. So side of the cheek, boom, and boom. You can see that those don't line up. So you see how I'm using cross contours to measure different landmarks. You do the same thing when you're copying, right? You use plumb lines. Actually, have I gone with you guys over plumb lines? No, I haven't. So when measuring things, use horizontal and vertical lines. And the same thing applies to three-dimensional form. So same thing happens here is, with this skull again, the orbital of your head, right, is just not in the same form. Is again pointing in the wrong direction. And because of that, you're putting in the cross contours in the wrong places. So right now the face, like the eyes right here, are pointing this way. Your mouth is pointing this way, and your skull is pointing this way. Basically, try and make your features line up a bit more. Oh, that is wild. So yes, so one way you can get around all these like issues that you're having right here is you're starting off with really complex forms. Doing cross contours on something that's already finished is very, very difficult. That's why this is relatively hard. But drawing cross contours on just a sphere alone isn't all that difficult, right? It's difficult, but for different reasons. It's mainly because just trying to get round fucking lines is really fucking hard. But anyways, but what's much easier is to do cross contours on simplified shapes, simplified forms. So when you're doing the sphere, right? Here's a nice little trick, right? This is the cross contour of the sphere. Here's a nice little trick. These cross contours should also be parallel. Here's where perspective comes back into play. Remember the relationship between parallels? Well, this line on your sphere, matches up with these lines on your boxes. That's how you can make sure they line up. That's why when you're drawing the skull, that's why I like to think about like drawing an egg and a box for my skulls, right? Because then it's much harder to mess up the alignment. I say as I mess up the alignment. So this line right here, that goes on your sphere, also matches up with this line right here. And this line right here shares the same relationship as these two lines. And this line on the side, if I extend this box a bit, is actually just this line right here. So this is why I'm talking about like breaking things down into boxes and spheres a lot. You see how like this line and this line, this is at the center of this box, and this line is at the center of the sphere. It's just this line follows. And getting really, really good at these cross contours makes you really, really good at understanding three-dimensional form. And then you don't have the same issues of misaligning, like your cranium is misaligned with your face, misaligned with this stuff. Because then you use these boxes right here to do the smaller alignments. Then you can use these as like reference points for your other forms to get non-misaligned skulls and stuff. That's why for me it's like much easier to like draw a head in perspective than it is to do almost anything. It's because I've just done it a lot, right? And boom, I get a skull in mostly correct perspective, even though I've not seen a skull from exactly that angle, right? It's because I had a decent enough box where I can just like do the rest of this stuff well enough. Using the boxes with the cross contours to like help you just guesstimate where the lines are supposed to go is the best way I can put it. Doing these cross contours helps you guesstimate where to put the features, because ideally you do this, like you do the cross contouring step with literally every form you do to make sure they line up and stuff, but that's really, really fucking slow and tiresome. So you can use those like boxes, get a close enough shape, right? And make sure there's like simple shapes work, and then get really, really good at guesstimating. That's how you can become an efficient artist. Yes, that's a really good way of putting. That's a really good takeaway from what I was saying. You somehow made sense of my gibberish. Use the tools, use the cross contours, use everything in your to your advantage. You're trying to solve a problem. Why limit yourself? Woo! All right, that makes 4 hours. Fuck me, finally. I'm so tired. Ugh. My brain's been like working at like 100% like for the last like 2 hours.